Ever feel like you're drowning in a to-do list? I think we've all been there. Today we're diving deep into Brian Tracy's Eat That Frog. Have you heard of this one?
Oh, absolutely. A classic. It's all about conquering procrastination and boosting productivity.
Okay, so the title, catchy for sure, but Eat That Frog, what's that all about?
Well, imagine starting each day by tackling your biggest, most daunting task. That's your frog.
Okay, so not literally eating a frog, got it.
Exactly. It's a metaphor.
Makes sense. But still, starting the day with your toughest task. That doesn't sound very appealing.
It's not about being easy. It's about being effective. And Brian Tracy knows a thing or two about effectiveness. The guy went from being a laborer to a top executive. He even traveled the world and learned multiple languages along the way.
Wow. Sounds like he really walks the walk.
He does. And in Eat That Frog, he shares his insights on how to stop procrastinating and get things done. He says the average executive has a backlog of 300 to 400 hours of work.
Whoa. No wonder we feel overwhelmed. So where do we even begin with all those frogs?
Well, Tracy's a big believer in the power of written goals. He actually credits them with transforming his own life.
Really? How so?
He went from being a struggling salesman to a top executive in just a few years. And he says it all started with writing down his goals.
So there's something about actually putting pen to paper that makes a difference.
Exactly. It makes it real, tangible, helps you crystallize your vision. In the book, he outlines 7 key steps for setting and achieving goals.
7 steps. We'll have to dig into those. But first, I think a lot of us struggle with procrastination. Any advice from Mr. Tracy on how to actually stop putting things off?
Well, he introduces this concept called the 80-20 rule. Have you heard of that one?
Vaguely, I think. Remind me.
Sure. It's the idea that 20% of our efforts often produce 80% of our results.
Interesting. So it's not about doing everything. It's about doing the right things.
Exactly. And those right things, those are often your frogs, the high-impact tasks that make the biggest difference.
Okay, so how do we figure out which tasks fall into that crucial 20%?
Tracy gives us a tool for that, the ABCDE method.
And that is?
It's pretty simple. You categorize every task on your to-do list as A, B, C, D, or E based on importance and consequences.
So A tasks would be?
Your frogs, the ones you want to eat first.
Got it. Eat those frogs. And the E tasks?
Those you can probably eliminate altogether. Not really that important.
Love it. So this ABCD method helps you prioritize and focus on what really matters.
Exactly. It's about working smarter, not just harder.
This is great. Instead of a mile-long to-do list, you've got a clear roadmap for action. But wouldn't focusing only on those A tasks make us neglect other important stuff? Things that might not be urgent but still need to get done.
That's a good point, and Tracy acknowledges that. He suggests spending a few minutes each morning planning your day.
Planning. I know I should do that more.
It makes a difference. Map out your schedule, prioritize your tasks, and you'll be able to allocate time for those A tasks without totally ignoring the B and C tasks.
So it's about balance, not just rushing through those big scary slogs. But sometimes it feels like everything's a priority. How do you determine which tasks are actually the most important?
Tracy talks about identifying your key result areas. Think of them as the vital functions of any job. Most of the value you contribute comes from excelling in those core areas.
Okay, key result areas. And how do we identify them?
He suggests focusing on your top 3. One of those likely contains your daily frog.
So it's about identifying the foundation of your work and building from there. Makes sense. But what if we're still struggling to make progress, even after identifying our frogs in key result areas?
Well, Tracy also has this idea of creative procrastination.
Creative procrastination. Now that sounds interesting. How does that work?
It's not about being lazy. It's about strategically putting off low-value tasks so you can create space for the important ones.
Ah, so you're procrastinating on purpose. That's kind of brilliant. But how do you know which tasks to put off?
That's where the ABCDE method comes in handy again, those E tasks. They're prime candidates for creative procrastination.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. So we've identified our frogs, prioritized our tasks. What's next on this frog-eating journey?
Well, Tracy emphasizes the importance of constantly upgrading your skills. He suggests reading in your field for an hour each day, attending seminars, listening to audiobooks during your commute.
So it's like sharpening your tools before starting a project.
Exactly. And never stop learning. The more you know, the more valuable you become.
That makes sense. But how do we fit all this into our already busy schedules? There are only so many hours in the day.
Right. And that's where Tracy's concept of single handling comes in. He's a big advocate for focusing on one task without interruption until it's finished.
It's a tough one. I'm a notorious multitasker.
We've all been there. But think about it. Each time you switch tasks, you have to reorient yourself. You lose time and mental energy. By single-handling, you maintain focus and momentum and actually accomplish more in less time.
It's like that saying, if you chase two rabbits, you'll catch neither.
Exactly. Focus your energy, be deliberate.
So eat that frog. It's not just about productivity hacks. It's about a whole philosophy of work and life.
It really is. It's about being intentional with your time and energy, about taking control and shaping your own destiny. Welcome back. Ready for more frog-eating wisdom?
Absolutely. My to-do list is already looking less scary. We were talking about single-handling tasks. But even with that, sometimes it feels like there's just not enough time to get everything done.
You know, Tracy actually addresses that. He says there's never enough time to do everything, but there's always enough time to do the most important thing. And remember, we've already talked about how to figure out those high-impact tasks using the 80-20 rule and the ABCDE method.
Yeah, it's not about trying to cram everything in. It's about choosing what to focus on.
Exactly. Tracy believes that time management is actually life management. It's about taking control of the sequence of events and being mindful of how you spend your time, both at work and at home.
That really resonates with me. I often feel like I'm just reacting to things instead of proactively shaping my own life.
Yeah.
How do we shift from that reactive mode to a more proactive one?
Well, Tracy suggests something that might sound a little counterintuitive. He says you need to identify your key constraints,
Key constraints, what does that mean?
the things that are holding you back, both internally and externally.
Okay. So for example, an internal constraint could be something like a lack of confidence. And an external constraint might be limited resources for a project.
Exactly. And once you've identified those constraints, you can start to strategically address them. Sometimes just by focusing on removing or alleviating a single constraint, you can make huge leaps forward in your productivity.
That's interesting. It's not about being limited by obstacles, but using them as guides.
Right.
Are there any real-world examples of this?
Sure. Imagine a writer who's struggling to meet deadlines. They identify their key constraint as distractions from social media. So they decide to set specific times for social media use, and they start using website blockers during work hours. As a result, they dramatically increase their writing output, and they start meeting those deadlines consistently.
That's a great example. It shows how even small changes can have a big impact. Okay, so we've talked about identifying those high-impact tasks and addressing our key constraints. What other productivity gems does Tracy have for us?
Well, he's a big advocate for creating those large chunks of time in your schedule to focus on those important tasks. He argues that you need those dedicated blocks of time to really get into a flow with those complex projects. You know how much more you accomplish when you can immerse yourself in a task without interruptions.
Oh yeah, for sure. But with all the demands on our time, finding those large chunks can feel impossible. Any tips on how to make it happen?
It definitely takes planning and discipline. He suggests techniques like scheduling those specific time slots for focused work, even if it's just an hour or two each day, and then fiercely protecting those blocks of time from interruptions.
It's a good reminder that even small, consistent pockets of focused time can add up. But those distractions, especially in today's world, are everywhere. Emails, social media, notifications, it's so easy to get pulled away.
Tracy reminds us that we're in control of our technology, not the other way around. He suggests things like turning off notifications, scheduling specific times to check email, and even taking those tech breaks altogether.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of constantly reacting to all those digital pings. We need to reclaim our attention and focus on what really matters. So we've covered managing time, minimizing distractions. What else can we do to boost productivity?
Tracy talks about maximizing your personal power, and this might surprise you. It starts with taking care of your physical and mental well-being.
That's an interesting connection. I wouldn't immediately think of personal well-being as a productivity booster, but it makes sense. You can't perform at your best if you're running on empty.
Exactly. Tracy talks about things like getting enough sleep, eating healthy foods, and exercising regularly. He even suggests scheduling your most demanding tasks for the times of day when you have the most energy.
For me, I'm definitely more productive in the mornings. Afternoons, not so much.
We all have those peak performance times. The key is to structure our work accordingly. By taking care of ourselves, we're essentially investing in our ability to focus, think clearly, make good decisions.
It's like a positive feedback loop. Taking care of ourselves fuels productivity, which then motivates us to continue prioritizing our well-being.
That's a great way to put it. A win-win.
Definitely. So beyond physical and mental health, what else contributes to maximizing personal power?
Tracy talks about cultivating the sense of urgency, a bias toward action. He believes that the faster you move on those important tasks, the more energy you have and the more you get accomplished.
That makes sense. It's about building momentum, not letting those frogs sit on the to-do list for too long. But doesn't that create a lot of pressure?
It's not about being stressed or frantic. It's about that inner drive to make progress. Tracy believes that action creates motivation, and the more you do, the more you want to do. It's about breaking through inertia and replacing procrastination with purposeful action.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between being deliberate and being driven.
Exactly. And finally, we come back to the importance of single-handling every task. Remember, focusing on one thing at a time until it's done. No more multitasking madness.
Right. We talked about this earlier. It's so tempting to juggle multiple things at once, but ultimately it divides our attention and slows us down.
Tracy believes that single-handling is the key to high performance and maximum productivity. It allows you to tap into that flow state where you're fully immersed in the task and working at your peak potential.
This has been such a great deep dive into Eat That Frog. It's amazing how many practical strategies he packs into this book.
He really does offer a wealth of tools and techniques. And the beauty is you can start using them right away, even just one at a time.
Before we move on to the final part of our dive, was there anything else we wanted to make sure we highlight from Eat That Frog?
There's one more really crucial element I think we should cover: the power of self-motivation. Tracy actually devotes an entire chapter to it, and it's filled with some really inspiring insights. We'll delve into that and more when we return for the last part of our deep dive.
Welcome back. We're wrapping up our exploration of Eat That Frog. So far, we've uncovered a ton of practical tips for boosting productivity and managing time more effectively.
And in this last part, we're tackling a topic that's crucial for putting all those strategies into action: self-motivation.
Because, let's face it, even with the best plan, it all comes down to having that inner drive, that motivation to get things done. And we've all had those days where motivation is just missing, especially when facing those big, challenging frogs. What does Tracy have to say about overcoming that?
Well, Tracy's approach to self-motivation is all about mindset. He believes we become what we think about most of the time. So if we're constantly dwelling on negativity or doubts, that's going to impact our actions and results.
Makes sense. It's like that saying, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
But how do we shift our thinking, especially when life throws curveballs?
It's a practice, not a one-time fix. Tracy actually believes that optimism is a learnable skill.
Oh, interesting. So you can actually learn to be more optimistic. How does that work?
He outlines specific behaviors that optimists tend to exhibit, things we can all cultivate.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me about these optimistic behaviors.
First, optimists look for the good in every situation. They don't deny the challenges, but they try to find a silver lining, even amidst setbacks.
So it's about focusing on what you can control and finding those opportunities for growth, even in difficult times.
Exactly. And secondly, optimists seek the valuable lesson in every setback. They believe that difficulties come not to obstruct, but to instruct.
I love that. Turning failures into feedback that helps us learn and improve.
Right. And they don't dwell on problems. They focus on solutions. Instead of complaining about what's wrong, they immediately start brainstorming ways to fix it.
That's a powerful shift in mindset. It's about taking ownership and making things better rather than feeling helpless. So far, we've got finding the good, learning from setbacks, and focusing on solutions. What's a fourth optimistic behavior?
Optimists keep their eyes on the prize. They think and talk about their goals, visualizing their desired outcomes, and maintaining that forward momentum.
It's like they're already living in the reality of their goals, even before they've fully achieved them.
Exactly. And Tracy believes that when you combine these optimistic behaviors with positive self-talk, you create an unstoppable force for achievement.
It sounds like self-motivation is really about cultivating a positive mindset and believing in yourself. But what about those times when we feel discouraged or face setbacks? How do we bounce back from those moments?
It's important to remember that it's not about being perfect or never experiencing setbacks. It's about resilience.
Resilience, so bouncing back, learning from the experience, and keeping moving forward.
Exactly. It's about embracing the journey with all its ups and downs and trusting that you have the strength and ability to overcome challenges.
This has been such an inspiring deep dive into Eat That Frog. I'm walking away with a renewed sense of purpose and a whole toolbox full of practical strategies to tackle those frogs in my own life and to cultivate that inner drive to keep moving forward.
That's fantastic to hear. And remember, it all starts with taking that first step, even if it's just identifying your biggest frog for tomorrow. And who knows, maybe eating that frog won't be so bad after all.
It might just be the key to unlocking our fullest potential.
Exactly.
This deep dive has definitely given me the tools and the motivation to start eating those frogs one bite at a time. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep those to-do lists shrinking.